Hello, you're listening to Attack Friday, actionable tips, tricks, and coachable knowledge. Attack Friday is brought to you by the Change Your POV Podcast Network. And I'm Eddie Lazary, your host. Let's get ready to attack. Hello, folks, and welcome to Attack Friday, actionable tips, tricks, and coachable knowledge. This is the first episode of an 11-part series that everything talks about that I'm going to be covering is things that you should have been taught, but you never were, but you still need to know them. And, really quick, when I first got out of the Army in 2005, I hit the ground running, and nothing was going to stop me, so I thought. I was very successful at least I consider myself very successful in the Army, and my plan was to apply those same ideas and principles in my life and in my career once I got out of the Army. But what I discovered was a huge shock to my system. What made me successful in the military was not going to make me successful now that I was out. And what I found was that there was a lot of things that I didn't know, and for that matter, I was never taught. And furthermore, I didn't know who could or who would teach me all of those things that I didn't know, but I desperately needed to. And so that's what spurred this 11-part series. And again, I don't know why I picked 11. I just came up with 11 things in my head really quickly of things that were never taught to me, but I still was expected to know them. And if I had known them at the time, I would have been way more successful. One of the first things that came to mind, as a matter of fact, the very first thing that I wrote down, is effective communication with email. And that's what this discussion today is going to be about. So really quick, some of the things that we're going to cover in this episode, we're going to talk about email etiquette. We're talking about email versus letter. We're talking about BLUF, B-L-U-F. It's an acronym that stands for bottom line up front. We're going to talk about know when to stop email. You're like, what? Like I'm never stopping email? Well, maybe you'll reconsider after this episode. And then we're going to talk about email signature. There's a lot more we can cover in emails. As a matter of fact, I got some amazing resources. I've got some additional podcasts that I've listened to that I found very helpful around email. There's a couple of books that are also incredibly helpful, and some blog posts or other articles that I found online that are extremely helpful. And you can get all of that for free simply by, again, here are the steps you've got to take. Head on over to, and if you go to the show notes page for this episode, the instructions will be there as well. But you got to head over to iTunes, leave an honest rating and review on the Change Your POV Podcast Network, and take a screenshot of your review and email it to me at eddie@changeyourpov.com. And once you email it to me, I will send you the link and password that you'll need to get access to all of the information, all of the downloadables, resources that I'm going to cover over this 11-part series, including everything we're going to talk about today. All right, so let's get into this. Email etiquette. Now, first and foremost here, folks, email is probably the most used, I'd venture to say overused form of communication we have today. If I were to rank communication in terms of effectiveness, I think the first most effective form of communication is face-to-face communication, because you have the ability to read body language, to look at facial expressions, get an idea whether or not they're actually paying attention or they're just glossed over, kind of listening to you murmur words at them. If they're engaged in the conversation, if they're interested in what you're saying, if they're angry, whatever. I mean, you have the ability. Communication done face-to-face is more than just words, right? It's everything. It's expression. It's attitude. It's all of that. So that's probably the most effective form of communication is in-person, face-to-face communication. And then, obviously, we live in a very global world. We're calling it now a flat Earth, right? Everything is kind of connected, and we all are operating. Everything is interconnected through the internet and through company and business and the way we conduct ourselves. And so we obviously can't all always be in the same room with someone when we're communicating. So the next best way, in my opinion, is like a Skype conversation. So it's like a phone call or a phone conversation, but with the added ability to kind of look at somebody's expression on their face. And again, you're not going to get the full body read, but you are going to get at least expression on face, and it helps, right? And then the third way, of course, is telephone, and then after that would be, the email communication. Email communication, my opinion, is definitely not the highest ranking or even in the top 3 of the highest ranking forms of communication. However, it's the one form of communication that we seem to do the most often in a corporate environment or in business. And, let's be honest, not everybody does it very well, and I never did it very well when I first started out either. And I was taking my bachelor's studies, and I was in my undergrad classes for business administration. We learned about effective writing, right? How to write an MLA formatted paper or an APA formatted paper. We talked about email in terms of like a form of communication, but we never really got into the specifics of, effective communication using email. We just kind of briefly touched on it. And then I got into my master's studies in my MBA courses. And again, I mean, we covered, probability and statistics and quantitative analysis and Six Sigma. And I mean, we covered a lot of incredible information, but email communication wasn't on the agenda. And so, I ended up graduating with my MBA, get into corporate America, and, never had a boss that ever sat me down to talk to me about it, never had a mentor sit me down to talk to me about it. It was just one of those things that I just kind of had to learn on my own. And man, did I make some huge mistakes. And what my original expectations of email are much different than they are today. And so that's the whole crux of this episode, is to shed some light onto email. If you've never been sat down by somebody, or you've never attended a course or a class that specifically talks about email, then you're probably going to find this eye-opening, to say the least. All right. First and foremost, emails are someone else's demand for your time. It's up to you to manage your relationship with your email. And I know that sounds really weird, a relationship with email. Yes, folks, if you've got an inbox, you have a relationship with your email. And it's up to you to manage that relationship and manage those expectations. Let me say it again. Emails are someone else's demand for your time. But the coin has two sides, right? So that means that your emails to others are your demand for their time, okay? If you need, or if you feel the need to sit and react to every single email that comes in when it comes in, then that will be what you end up doing. And so the guidance or recommendation that I have is this crazy thing called email 3 times a day. And for anybody that's listened to me or listened to the show for any length of time, you know that one of the primary business resources that Bennett and myself kind of go back to from time and time again is the resource manager tools. And in fact, we interviewed one of the co-founders of Manager Tools, Mr. Mark Horstman, on a previous show. He's one of my virtual mentors and a hero of mine. Great dude. Him and Mike Ozan, both West Point grads, very successful in corporate America, and have been basically executive consultants for, I think, probably going on close to 15, 20 years now. And this is their recommendation, and it's incredible. Email 3 times a day. And I have the links to those. There's a 2-part podcast that they put on that talks about email 3 times a day. And the links to those podcasts are in the downloadable documentation that you'll get once you follow the steps that I mentioned at the top of the show about how to get access to all these resources. Now, here's some things about email etiquette, and in no particular order, but here's some things, some talking points that I really want to quickly go over. And the first one is write an effective subject line, all right? And in your email, stick to the subject. when you're sending an email, if you just in the subject line you say hey or hello or what's up, or it's incredibly informal or it's non-descriptive. If somebody's very, very busy, now remember, your emails are a demand for others' time, right? If you're like me and you get multiple emails a day, I don't open up every single email. If you get anybody that gets any amount of like large volume emails, they're just not going to sit there and open up every single email. We have to find ways to prioritize what's important to us. We have our goals and objectives. We have things that we have to accomplish. There's meetings that we have to attend. We're all busy, right? We're not all just sitting there waiting for your email, okay? I know it seems like we are, but we're not. And I oftentimes use the subject line as a determination whether or not to open and read further. If it's something in that subject line that has something to do with a deliverable of mine, or if it has something to do with something that I'm working on, or it has to do with an action that requires my attention, or if it's urgent to move the business forward, if it's going to shut down whatever it is your business is, right? If your business is manufacturing, if it's you get an email and the subject line talks about, there's a problem and it could potentially shut down the manufacturing line. Like, those are critical. Those are important emails. You've got to get to those first, right? If it's just somebody that's just, and that's the thing, right? If you have to send an email to somebody and you're talking about some critical thing that's happened that may potentially shut down the production line, but you put in the subject line, yo, what's up? I mean, your email's not going to get read when it needs to get read, because other people are doing the same thing. They're looking at the subject line. It's very similar to like when you're scrolling through Facebook or when you're scrolling through LinkedIn or any social media account. You don't open up and read everything. You don't watch every single video, right? You're essentially looking at the headline, right? Is the headline interesting? Is it, does it provoke you to want to open it and read it further? Emails are very similar. Think of the subject line of your email like the headline of a magazine, or the headline in a newspaper, or a headline in a social media account. You need your subject line to match the urgency level and severity and information contained within the email. Okay? And you need to stick to the subject. So if your body of your email doesn't match your subject line, you just baited them to open it up, but it doesn't match, then let's just put it this way. I remember that in the back of my mind. So the next time I get an email from you and the subject line looks and seems urgent, and I know that it probably isn't, then I may not open your email. Unfortunately, there'll be a day when you've got to actually send me an urgent email, and I may skip over it because you cried wolf one too many times, and I may not get to the emails that you've sent me. Stick to the subject line, write an effective subject line, and make sure that it has to do with the body of your email. All right? Here's another one. No grouping emails, one topic at a time. I can't tell you how many times I receive an email and there's a subject line, it's a good subject line, and the person starts off the email talking about the subject, and there's an action in there, or there's a to-do, or there's something in there, information, and then all of a sudden, the next paragraph or two down, it says something like, while I have you, I also need an update on this. And, oh, by the way, here's a question about this, and here's this, and here's this, and here's this. So now all of a sudden, that one email turns into 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 separate things. This becomes managing tasks very difficult. It also makes responding to emails difficult, because if you're leaving the subject line alone, which you should, you may be responding to something completely unrelated to the subject line now. So now your emails start taking on the life of its own, and you start getting these really long email strings, and you start losing the context of the conversation. And if you've got to copy somebody else in midstream, they're going to get very, very confused about what the conversation is about. So if you've got multiple things or multiple topics that you want to cover, then just create a new email, a new subject line, and cover one topic per email. That makes communication much more effective, much more streamlined, and especially if you got multiple people on the thread, then they can follow the conversation, they can jump in where they need to, or they could, abandon that conversation if they feel that it's not relevant to them. Next one, leave emotion out of your email. If you're trying to express your anger or your frustration or, something like that, if you got to put words in your email that are all caps because you're trying to show emotion, then that should be your first indicator that you should not be writing that email right now. Okay? You shouldn't be writing that email at all. Or if you've got to write it just to get it off your chest, fine, but don't hit send. Or better yet, to alleviate any chance of accidentally hitting send, write it in a Word document somewhere. Get it off your chest. Feel better about your day. Get up, go take a walk, go grab a cup of coffee or whatever, and then come back. And once, because let me tell you, folks, once you write that hot-headed email and you hit send, there ain't no getting it back, all right? And you may end up saying things that you regret later, and they could have a dramatic impact on your career in not a good way. All right, next one. Proofread before you hit send. Oh, man, I can't tell you how many times I hit send, and then I go back to read my email, and I was like, oh, my God, I can't believe I said that. How I look stupid, right? It was a word that auto-corrected to the wrong word, or it was maybe I wrote the phrase twice because I was writing really fast, and my mind sometimes moves faster than my fingers can type, and so I end up kind of repeating myself a couple of times in the email, and I go back and I read it, and I'm like, oh, man, and just how dumb do I look, right? You can avoid that by simply proofreading your email before you hit send. And better yet, the best thing to do, and you may look or sound a little silly doing this, but trust me, it's worth it, is if you actually read back that email and you read it out loud. Not like, loud like you talk to somebody across the room loud, but just kind of under your breath, just kind of read it softly to yourself. If you got your own office, it's less creepy. If you share, if you're in a cubicle and there's a bunch of people around you, it might seem a little weirder, but people will get used to it. Just kind of read it back, because oftentimes when people read anything, whether it's a book or an email or a blog post or whatever, they're reading it and they're sounding it out they're reading it to themselves in their head as they're reading it. And so at least that's what I do when I read stuff, right? I can actually hear the person reading it to me in my head, kind of thing. And written word sounds different when it's spoken than when it's written. So you want your emails to be a communication. You're not writing a research paper. You're not writing a dictation. You're not writing a thesis. All right, it's a communication that needs to be effective. And the more you can craft your written word, your written emails, into a style that is communicative, the more effective it's going to be. If you're trying to wow people with your big words and use of grammar and vocabulary, that's going to make you feel really good about yourself, but it's going to frustrate your reader. Some people are going to be like, oh my God, just get to the point already. All right, next one is seek a second pair of eyes if you have questions. Sometimes, and again, this isn't really around emotion. Like some people will write a very emotion-lit email, and they'll come to me and say, hey, could you read this? And what they're trying to do is they're trying to justify putting that emotion in the email, and that's what they're looking for. And I never recommend that you send an email that's emotionally charged whatsoever. Just a bad idea. I've done it. It's horrible. I know people that have done it. I know people have lost their jobs for doing it. It's just never a good thing. What this is saying, though, is seeking a second pair of eyes if you have any questions. Sometimes I will be trying to convey a message or a deliverable or an action that's needed, and sometimes I'm not sure if what I'm trying to say is what's being interpreted by the reader. So I may have somebody I'll either shoot it to them separately, or I'll have them come in my office and read it and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to send, or what I'm trying to say. When you read this, is that what you interpret? Is that what you're getting back as the message? And it's sometimes very eye-opening to have somebody else kind of proofread your work because they may come up with different ideas or different viewpoints that you never considered when you first wrote the piece. So it's always good to get a second pair of eyes if you have any questions. Never assume privacy in your emails because guess what? Emails are never private. They're never private. I don't care if you send it to your best friend and you say at the bottom, please don't tell anybody. There is nothing stopping that person from forwarding your email on to someone. There's nobody stopping that person from accidentally forwarding your email on to somebody. And especially if you work in corporate America, every email that you send is going on a server somewhere to be archived forever. It can be pulled up for any purpose later down the road. Thanks to awesome things like Sarbanes-Oxley and Enron and other organizations where they've used emails as a way to collect evidence and etc., do audits and things like that. I mean, email is on a server. Everything that you write is stored forever. So email is never, ever private. Don't assume that it is. Don't write anything. If you're writing something and you're expecting it to be private or secure in some way, then you're under false assumptions. Never assume that your email is private because it never is. And it kind of goes into the next point, and that is emails last forever. You can write an email today, 10 years from now, somebody somewhere can dig it up. And sometimes it may not be in your favor, right? It may be some things that you said 10 years ago. Maybe you've got a different position on it now, or maybe you've gone through anger management courses, so you're a different person now than you were then. But remember, once you hit send, it's out there forever, and it's never going away. Next is communication is done by the listener, or in this case, the reader. And we've said this on the show many times. Communication is done by the listener. You may be the one writing the email, but it's not you that has to try to interpret what it is that you're saying. That is done by the reader in this case. So you need to write the email for the reader. Emails are not for you. If you're writing an email, the email is for the reader, and you need to write it for them. Don't assume that all of your emails are getting read. Just because you hit send and you've copied 15 people on your email, don't assume that everybody's reading your email. Because I'll be honest, I don't read every email that I get. I don't. I already said at the beginning that I'm very selective on which emails that I read and how I prioritize my email. I don't read every email. I just don't. Don't assume that other people are reading yours either. All right? Next one is, even though sending emails is instantaneous, it's an unreasonable expectation to believe that it should be read instantaneously. How many times, oh my God, I can't tell me how many times, I'll get a phone call. And I'll pick up the phone, I'll answer the phone, and there'll be somebody on the other end saying, I just sent you an email. Did you get it? Like, really? You just sent me an email, and now you want to know if I got it. Well, if you hit send and you got the appropriate email address for me, then yes, I got it. But if you're asking me, did I read it yet? No, I didn't. I didn't read your email. I mean, again, sending emails instantaneous, but to expect that somebody on the other end is going to read it right away is just an unreasonable expectation. It just is. Anybody that's sitting at their desk reacting to every single email as it comes in, listen, unless you're working a call center, if you've got a job that has to do with actioning emails as a request as they come in and you're being measured against that, then normal, typical business, day-to-day activities, I'm not reading emails instantaneously when they come in, and I don't expect anybody to read mine as they come in instantaneously either. It's just a false expectation. You really need to give people an opportunity to respond. And, my rule of thumb is, at least 48 hours. I mean, if they're not responding within 48 hours, then maybe they just chose not to read my email, or maybe they decided that what was in my email had no bearing on them, or that there was no action for them. Maybe that's how they interpret it, but maybe in fact there is actions for them. So I may need to follow up with a phone call or say, hey, I sent you an email a couple of days ago. There's a couple of actions in there. I was just wondering if you had any feedback on those actions, something to that effect. All right, next. Sending an email does not alleviate you from your responsibility. It's this concept of tossing over the fence, all right? I can't tell you how many times I've gone to somebody that's worked for me and I've asked them a question, hey, where are we with this thing, right? This action, whatever it is. And the person says, oh, well, I sent so-and-so an email. Okay, and? Well, they haven't, that person I sent has an action that they haven't gotten back to me. Okay, and what I'm getting at is, if you have a task or you have a responsibility, it's still your responsibility, even if you got to get other people involved or if there's other deliverables by others. By just sending an email and tossing it over the fence does not alleviate you of that responsibility. It's still your job to make sure that you get the information from that person or you get their deliverable completed if it's an input to something that you're doing that you need, because guess what? You have an output, and your output is the deliverable to your boss or your manager, all right? So sending email does not alleviate you from your responsibility. You can't just hit send, toss it over the fence, and then, dust yourself off and expect that your job is done. It's not. You're still responsible for the task. I don't care if you send 50 emails to somebody. You still own that responsibility. All right, the next one that we're going to talk about is email etiquette. We're going to talk about the CC, and the BCC, lines on an email. And a lot of people don't understand this. I didn't understand this when I first started, and a lot of people that I see that I get emails from all the time, they don't understand it either, okay? So there's typically 3 lines on an email. It's the to line, the CC line, and the BCC line. And in some cases, some email clients like Outlook and others, you may have to go in and activate the BCC line if it's not already available. So if you open up your email client, you may only have 2 lines, a to and a CC. So let's talk about each of these 3. All right, the to line. So who should you put in the to line? Well, only send to those that need to action or provide input. It is possible to overdo the number of recipients, okay? Rule of thumb here. If you got to send an email and you're expecting somebody to do something or to respond to something or provide you with some type of feedback or input, they need to be in the to line. If you have somebody that you are expecting to do something and you put them in the CC line, then you shouldn't expect them to get to it or expect them to follow through with it, because the carbon copy, the CC line we're going to talk about next, the carbon copy line is just that. It's a carbon copy. It's directed towards people that need to be aware of the communication or may have some interest of some sort, but they don't really have any actions. Also, the CC line, you're not expecting people in the CC line to provide any type of action, follow-up, or response. And also, just like the to line, it is possible to overdo the number of recipients, okay? If you're copying everybody in the world in the to line and the CC line, then you got a problem. You really have to ask yourself, who really needs to be on this email, okay? Because remember, every email you send is a demand for somebody else's time. And it's always a good thing to be respectful of people's time, okay? So if you're copying the world on your emails every single time, then, that's just not a professional way of doing business or conducting yourself. So remember, the to line are for people or individuals, either one or multiple folks, that you have or that you need to communicate to that have some type of deliverable, some action, some follow-up, some information. Those are going to be the ones that you direct in the to line. For those that you put in the CC line, those are people that may have some interest in the communication, or there may be some interest of some sort, or they may need to be aware of for some reason, but you're not expecting anything from them. You're not expecting a follow-up or response or an action from them. And keep the number of people that you have in the to line and the CC line to minimum. You want to keep it at the lowest level possible. And the third one, and my favorite, is the BCC line, or the blind copy, or the blind carbon copy is what it technically is. And folks, this one, a lot of people just have no idea how to use the BCC line. So the BCC line you should really use sparingly. You should not be using it all the time. And it's to protect recipients from other recipients. All right, so if you want to send something to a group of people, but you don't want your recipients to know who else you sent the email to, then you would put them in the blind copy line. Okay, here's a good example. I had a vendor, or I had a branch that I was working with, another facility, that was very unhappy with the performance and quality of a particular vendor. And so I got involved, and I ended up sending an email to the vendor and explaining basically our position and how unhappy we were with the quality of delivery and quality of service that they were providing. Now, I wanted the people at the branch within my company, I wanted them to be aware that I sent this email to the vendor, but I didn't want to give the vendor direct access back to those folks that work in my organization, because that vendor needs to work with me. I'm in procurement, and that's my role, that's my function, that's my responsibility. And so I wanted to keep the conversation between me and the vendor, but I wanted folks within my organization to see the communication. So I put the folks in my organization in the BCC line, so they got copied on the email. They got to see what I wrote to them, but the vendor had no idea I had sent that email or that anyone else was copied on that email other than them. So that's an effective way to use the BCC line. And remember, it can be dangerous to your career if not used properly. If you're using the BCC line to talk about people behind their back or to share information, remember, nothing that you send is private, and it could get around. Okay, so if you start getting in a BCC loop back and forth, and it's around policies and procedures, or it's around gossip, or it's around other things that are just considered unprofessional, you could get caught in a whirlwind of hurt as a result. So use BCC very sparingly. All right, here's one. Email versus writing letters. A lot of folks that have no real formal education or have been taught specifically about email, they craft their emails the same way they would a letter, okay? And this is something that I started when I first started out in corporate America, and I did very poorly. I crafted my emails like letters because I was familiar with writing letters, but I was not familiar with writing emails, okay? So let's go through the differences here. Email clients like Outlook, Gmail, Yahoo automatically format the text, and they left justify the words. So there's no need to indent your paragraphs. So if you're writing a letter, you say, Dear Mom, comma, and then you hit enter, and then you hit tab in order to indent, right? And then you write your email, right? And then you go to the next paragraph, and you hit tab again, and you indent again. So you don't need to do that. When you're writing an email, no indents are needed, okay? Unless you're writing an email and you've got things grouped together in, numbers or bullet points or something like that, you want to use the indent or that hierarchy structure within your email to help with clarity and brevity, then that's acceptable. But if you're just indenting your paragraphs because you're used to doing it when you're writing a letter, don't do that. Emails are not letters. Next one, number 2. Letters tell a story. They are lengthy and they are full of fluff. Emails should be short, clear, and concise. When you write a letter to Mom, you're telling her about the weather and what you did and how much fun this was. And then you get to the bottom of the email and it's like, okay, so I just wanted to ask, now that I have you, can I come over for Thanksgiving or something like that, right? Emails need to be short, clear, and concise, okay? They're not a story. You don't need a big, lengthy background or backstory. Just get to the point, right? Next one, letters often have no action or follow-up or status. Emails need to, or what's the point? Right? Emails should have action or follow-ups or status. Letters, they don't need any of that, okay? Again, two different types of communication here. Next one is emails need goals or objectives. Letters don't need any of these things, okay? So what do I mean by emails need goals or objectives? When you sit down and you start crafting an email, you need to ask yourself, what's the goal of this email? Is it to inform somebody? Is it to provide an action to somebody that they need to follow up on? Is it to answer a question that somebody had? Is it to ask a question that you have of someone else? Is it to provide status of work that you're performing, or a task that you are working on, or an objective that you have? You need to be very clear about what this email, what's the end state, what's the point of the email. If you don't have a point, and there's no agenda, there's no goal or objective, then you probably shouldn't put it in an email. You should probably find a different way to communicate whatever you're trying to communicate. All right, letters don't need goals and objectives. They don't need an ask. They don't need input. They don't need any of those things. Okay. Many people write emails, and it's very much like a letter. I get done reading it, and I'm like, okay, what was the point? What is it that they need? What is it that they want? I'm very unclear about any of this. Then I got to respond to that email, or pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I don't understand what your ask is here. Can you elaborate? Can you get a little bit more specifics? And it's very frustrating. Okay, remember, emails are written for the audience, not for you. All right, number 5, maximize white space when writing emails. Letters can have long sentences and grouped paragraphs, and this makes quickly reading your emails very difficult if you do this. So you should have a lot of spaces, a lot of white space between your, very short sentences make up a paragraph, very short paragraphs within your email, and very few paragraphs at that. Your email shouldn't be very long or lengthy, but there should be some white space in there. If I open up an email and all I see is dense run-on sentences and paragraphs that are combined together, and it just looks like one great big file of words, I'm not reading that. I'm just not. I don't have time for that. All right, I might get to it later. I might not, but I'm not reading it, okay? Number 6, write your emails for the reader, not for yourself. My God, I keep coming back to that, right? So those are the 6 tips when it comes to emails versus letters. Don't indent. Letters tell a story. Emails don't need to. Letters often have no action. Emails should. Letters often don't have goals and objectives. Emails should. You need to maximize your white space and always write your emails for the reader, not for yourself. All right, the next one is BLUF, B-L-U-F, bottom line up front. There's nothing more frustrating than receiving an email that is paragraph after paragraph full of fluff and filler, backstory and run-on sentences, and then finally, all the way down at the very bottom of the email is the task, or the question, or the request, or the action needed. We are all very busy, and we get far more emails than we probably need, right? Do your audience a favor and get to the point as early in the email as possible. Get to the point quick. Bottom line up front. That's what the acronym stands for, BLUF. Get to the point and get it up front, and then fill in the backstory if you really feel the need to. But get your ask to the top. That's huge. The next is know when to stop an email. We've all been there, right? You get an email from someone, you email back with a question about the original email, then you get a response attempting to clarify or answer your questions. This only raises more questions, so you email back. And then a response comes back with some sort of response. You get frustrated, you shoot an email back with your own short response. This continues back and forth a few more times, and each time you are both getting further and further away from center. Stop. Take the high road here and cease the virtual email tennis. This is not helpful. Not to you, not to them. pick up the phone, or better yet, get up from your desk and go and have a talk with that individual if you are in the same building. Or pick up the phone if you're not in the same building, or do a Skype meeting or something. But just these run-on back and forth emails can get out of hand, out of control, and they're just awful. Stop them. You stop them. Don't wait for somebody else to stop them. You take the high road and just stop, okay? There's also a couple of podcast resources, also from Manager Tools, that says when not to use emails, part 1 and part 2. And the links to those are also found in the resources of this episode. Those are a great listen. You definitely want to take advantage of those. All right, the next one is email signature. Oh my God, this was probably one of my biggest pet peeves. Your email signature is the last little bit at the end of your email. This is a very critical element to your email. This will let your reader or readers know how they can get in touch with you. A lot of people, they don't have email or signatures at the bottom of their email. And oh my God, it makes getting a hold of them so much difficult. I mean, yes, I could always hit reply and send them an email back, but if I want to write them a letter, or if I want to give them a phone call, or I want to check out their website or the social media accounts, like, I can't do that without their signature. It's very, very frustrating. So there's some what I call minimum information that you need in your signature, and then there's additional information that you can add if you want to. So here's the minimum information that you should have in your signatures. First is your full name. Next is your title. And then third is your phone number, work and or cell, one or the other, or both. And then last is your address or P.O. box. So I want to know who you are, what's your title, how can I call you, and how can I send you a letter. That's it. That's the minimum information you should have in your signature. Now, additional information, if you want to include it, it doesn't hurt to include your web address. If you work for a company and you got a web address, or you own your own company, putting a web address in there is helpful. Your social media accounts. Maybe you've got LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or whatever the case may be. Maybe your company does. I know in my signature, I've got social media links that link out to my company social media accounts. It's very helpful for my vendors and customers to be able to follow us on socials. Really cool. And then finally is your picture or your company logo. Again, additional information, not necessary, but helpful if you do include it. And then finally, in the document that you can get, the free downloadables, I've included in there links to how to add signatures in Outlook, in Gmail, in Yahoo, and in your Mac for Apple. All right, and then finally, last but not least, I've got some additional resources at the bottom of the document here. I got a couple of blog posts that are very helpful. One of them is called Effective Email Communication, and the other one is from Forbes. It's called As Workplace Communication Evolves, Email May Not Prevail. And there's also a couple of really great books that I recommend in there as well. So if you want to get your hands on those links and those resources, it's very, very simple. All you got to do is go on to iTunes, leave an honest rating and review for the Change Your POV Podcast Network, take a screen capture of your review, and email it to me at eddie@changeyourpov.com, and I will email you back the link and password to all of the content for not only this episode, but all of the 11 in the 11-part series. This has been a great conversation. I hope you've gotten a little bit more information and a little bit more in the know when it comes to effective communication with email. Talk to you next week.